Hello, I'm Michael Topham and welcome to this second masterclass cloning and healing video. Having studied 4 of Photoshop's most valuable retouching tools in the part 1 video, it's time to put them to good use with a real image. The start image that we're going to be working on is silvercar.jpg, and you'll find this in the Start Images folder on the CD. So just load up this image into Photoshop. Taking a brief look at the image, we can instantly see that it has quite a few distracting elements to it, and it's these that we're going to be addressing and looking to remove out of shot. There are 4 main areas that we're going to be working on in this image, and these are the foreground, where there's quite a bit of road and sensor dirt. We'll be removing this with the healing brush tool. The next area that we'll be working on is the area beneath the car. There happens to be a small gap in the concrete which is rather off-putting and takes the attention away from the front of the car. We'll be removing this with Photoshop's patch tool, tidying up wherever necessary with the healing brush tool. Then we'll remove the base of the telegraph pole before extending this hedge right over towards the left hand side towards the bumper of the car with the clone stamp tool. This will remove the noticeable gap and improve the look of our background. Finally, we'll get rid of this telegraph pole using a combination of the healing brush for the pole itself and then the spot healing brush to remove the wires. We'll even show you how we can use selections as a barrier when we're retouching. There's no time to lose, let's get straight into the technique. Firstly, we need to make a duplicate layer to work on. Load up the layers palette by going up to window in the menu bar and then make sure you've got a tick alongside layers. And then to make your duplicate layer, just go across to layer in the menu bar, go down and click on duplicate layer, and then rename this cloning and healing. When you hit OK, you'll notice that this cloning and healing duplicate layer will arrive in your layers palette. Zoom into 100% by hitting Ctrl and plus a few times, and then scroll through your image down towards the bottom left hand corner of this image by holding down on the spacebar using the hand tool just to easily scroll through the image. Head across into your toolbox and pick out the healing brush tool, and when you've done that, just move up to your options bar, click on this little downwards arrow to make sure that your brush is correctly set up. We're looking for a diameter of 20 pixels, a hardness of 100%, and a spacing of around 25%. Once you've done this, you can just click on this small little arrow to remove it. Next, make sure that your mode is set to normal and your source is set to sampled. Also, just double check that the aligned box is ticked. Selecting aligned in the options bar means that you'll be able to reuse the most current sampling point no matter how many times you stop or start your painting. Move down towards the bottom left hand corner of your image and we're looking to remove this piece of sensor dirt. Hold down Alt on your keyboard and take a sample point just beneath this speck of sensor dirt, and then just very simply just brush over it with the healing brush to seamlessly remove it. It now looks like it was never there in the first place. Move through the rest of your foreground by holding down the space bar to enter the hand tool, and then just like we did a second ago, just hold down Alt to take a sample point next to a distraction, and then just very simply just paint it away with the healing brush tool. I'm just going to spend a few minutes retouching through my foreground area in my image with the healing brush tool, so I'll rejoin you again in a minute. So I've just spent about 5 or 10 minutes cleaning up this foreground area in my image, and we can see the difference between before and after by turning on and off the cloning and healing layer in the layers palette. So this was as the image stood in its original state. It looks rather dirty, there's quite a bit of sensor dirt down towards the bottom left hand corner, and I turn this layer back on in the layers palette, we can actually see the difference. It's looking a lot cleaner and a lot better for it. We can now move on and look to get rid of this gap in between the concrete, which is rather distracting at the moment. So just zoom back into the image just by pressing Ctrl and plus on your keyboard and then holding down the space bar just to position that gap neatly on your screen. Head across into your toolbox and pick out the patch tool, and if you're struggling to find it, you'll find it beneath the healing brush tool. Just give it a click there and then move up into your options bar. Make sure that you're selected on New Selection, and under the patch, make sure that it's selected on Source. Draw around this gap with the patch tool, and if you're looking to make a straight line with the patch tool, you can just hold down the Alt key, and then you can just use it like you would with the polygonal lasso, and just create straight lines. So I'm just going to draw the patch tool around that gap on my image, release, and you'll see the marching ants pop up on the screen. Hover the patch tool inside the marching ants, and then just drag this selection down very slightly, and you can begin to see the pixels that we're looking to use for replacement. So I'm just going to move this down very slightly and then just release, and we can actually see that the patch tool has worked reasonably well. Just hit Ctrl and D to deselect those marching ants, and then zoom back into the image to around 100% by hitting Ctrl and plus, moving down through the image by holding down on the spacebar. If there are any areas in the image where you think the patch tool hasn't worked quite as well, for example here there are a couple of white patches, a couple of lighter areas, you can just go back in, change the patch tool back to the healing brush tool, and then like we did with the earlier foreground areas, just hold down Alt to take a few sample points, and then just very carefully just retouch a few areas where the patch tool didn't do quite a good a job. So having completed some really good retouching work in the foreground areas with the healing brush tool and the patch tool, we can now start to concentrate on the right hand side of our image and look to remove this telegraph pole and extend this hedge over towards the left hand side with the clone stamp tool. Zoom back into 100% by hitting Ctrl and plus on your keyboard a few times, and then scroll over to the right hand side of the image by holding down the space bar, and then scroll right across until you can see the base of the telegraph pole. Move over to the toolbox and pick out the clone stamp tool, and then move up to your options bar and make sure that you've got a brush size of 50 pixels and the hardness is set to 100%. Moving across in the options bar, make sure the mode is set to normal, the opacity is set to 100% and the flow is set to 60%. Hold down Alt and take a sample point of the black hedge, and then we can use that just to very carefully paint over the top of that telegraph pole, and we're replacing the telegraph pole with pixels from the hedge. There we go, and then I'm just going to hold down Alt again and take a new sample point from the sky just to remove a little bit more of that telegraph pole. Don't worry too much about removing the whole of the telegraph pole just yet, as that's something we'll be doing with the healing brush. But for the moment, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to extend this hedge over towards the left hand side, and this is something we can also do with the clone stamp tool. Zoom out slightly by hitting Ctrl and minus, and then just zoom out so we can see this whole extensive area that we're looking to bring the hedge into. So we're looking to take the pixels from the right hand side and then paint a hedge over towards the left hand side, over towards the bonnet of the car. This isn't actually as difficult as it sounds, but first of all we need to make sure we've got our brush set up correctly in the options bar, and increase the size of your brush up to 100 pixels. Head down towards the bottom right of the image, and then hold down Alt and take a sample point from this hedge, around here. So I'm just going to take one sample point from there by left clicking on my mouse, and then just moving up through the image, I'm just going to slowly start painting a little bit more of a hedge up through the image there towards the edge of the car's bonnet. And this is actually just extending the hedge, making it look a little bit neater and making our background look a lot better. Remember again that it's important to take more than one sample point, so hold down Alt and then make a new sample point a little bit further along on the hedge, and then continue this hedge just a little bit further along. So now that we've used the clone stamp tool to extend that hedge over towards the left hand side, we can concentrate on removing this telegraph pole with the healing brush. Just zoom back into 100% by hitting Ctrl and plus a couple of times, and then hold down spacebar to move back across to the base of that telegraph pole. Let's just remove these couple of pieces of sensor dirt from our image by going across into the toolbox and picking out the spot healing brush. At the moment the brush is a little bit large, so just hit the left hand sided square bracket key just to reduce the size of the brush down towards around 20 pixels, and then just carefully just go over this piece of sensor dirt with one stroke just to remove it seamlessly. We need to change the spot healing brush back to the healing brush, but quite a neat little shortcut to do that is just hold down Shift and J on your keyboard, and you'll be able to see in the toolbox there by holding down Shift and clicking on J once, that instantly changes the spot healing brush across to the healing brush. Quite a nice little shortcut for when you're working quickly in your images. With the healing brush selected from the toolbox, just take a new sample point just over towards the left of the telegraph pole, and then just slowly start working your way up through the image, starting to remove it. It's important to realise it's going to take more than just one sample point to make a really good heel of this telegraph pole, so make sure you take lots of sample points from either side to remove it seamlessly. It's going to take me quite a bit of time working up through this image, removing this telegraph pole, so I'll rejoin you in a minute, and then we can take a look at how we can remove these wires with the spot healing brush tool. So having taken a bit of time and care with the healing brush tool, I've been able to remove that telegraph pole seamlessly, and all we're left with are these wires, which can be easily removed with the spot healing brush. So just go back across into the toolbox and pick out the spot healing brush tool, and make sure you've got a brush size set in your options bar of 20 pixels. Carefully run this brush just down the length of these wires, and you'll be able to see that this is just going to be easily and seamlessly removed. And again, like with the healing brush, this process is going to take quite a few minutes, so I'll rejoin you in a minute when I've got a little bit further down. The last small area that I need to remove is this telegraph pole and the wires, but they're quite close to the hedge, and I don't want to ruin our earlier cloning work that we made with the clone stamp tool. The best way to prevent ourselves from painting too close to the edge is to make a selection around the area that we're looking to remove. Just go across into the toolbox and pick out the lasso tool, and make sure that you've got a feather of 0 pixels set in the options bar, and then just very simply just draw this around the outside of the distraction that we're looking to remove. Once the marching ants have popped up, you can just go back into the toolbox and pick out the spot healing brush once more, and then just very carefully work inside this selection, and the selection will be working as a barrier, preventing you brushing too close to the hedge, spoiling our earlier cloning work. When you finally remove the telegraph pole with the spot healing brush, just like I have there, that's looking a lot better, we can just deselect these marching ants by hitting Ctrl and D. Finally, just move through the image at 100% using the hand tool just to scroll through the image, and if you see any noticeable pieces of dirt that you need to remove, any sensor dirt, anything like that, you can just remove them very quickly with the spot healing brush. So just have a good scroll around your image just to make sure that there's no other areas that need retouching. When you're happy with all of your retouching around the outside of your image, you can just zoom out by pressing Ctrl and minus, and then you can check out all of your hard work and see the real difference. When you're really happy with your final image, make sure you save it with a new file name. You can do that by going up to File, down to Save As, and then choose a location where you want to save it. I've called mine silvercaredit.psd, and I'm saving it as a Photoshop file so I can save that cloning and healing layer that we've made. Just click Save, and therefore you've got a new version of that fantastic retouched image. With all the hard work done with the clone stamp tool, spot healing brush and patch tool, make sure you check out the difference between before and after by turning your cloning and healing layer on and off in the layers palette. This is how our original image started out. There were quite a few distractions to it that needed to be removed, and this is how the image stands now. All the distractions and imperfections have been removed, and the whole image is looking so much tidier for the hard work that we've put in. I hope you've enjoyed watching this part 2 masterclass cloning and healing video, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.